counts as a bad habit, but it's actually good. Shaking, vibrating your leg when you have to be sitting for a long time gets the blood moving, better than being completely stationary for hours. As someone with ADHD, this is good news. God damn, how many ADHD symptoms do I have to recognize in myself before going to a doctor for a diagnosis? It's starting to get ridiculous. That's the best part of ADHD. Suspecting you have it, but it takes you 8 months to actually force yourself to make the appointment because of the ADHD. It's also useful when my toddler wants to be bounced. I just put him on my already shaking leg and it keeps going. This is one of my earliest memories. My dad bouncing me on his knee singing Yankee Doodle. His knee was the Pony LOL, man, I loved that. Interesting. I sit down almost every day for 10 plus hours a day since I work on my PC and work from home, then spend hours on my PC after. Sometimes I'll be sitting for 3-4 hours without getting up, and my legs never feel tired or in pain, probably because I'm shaking my legs unconsciously a lot. In fact, I just looked down and I'm doing it right now. It's good in that sense, but it's typically a nervous, anxious symptom, and we know that being in a chronic state of anxiety isn't a good thing. Not really. It's a form of self-stimulatory behavior, stimming. All people do some amount of stimming, though. It's much more common in those with autism, ADHD, and other disorders which affect sensory processing. It's a way to replace the random and distracting sensory inputs experienced at rest with predictable, repetitive, more easily filtered ones. Consider if someone were gently rubbing a feather against your arm while you were trying to focus. It would be distracting and would make everything more difficult. If you started to rock your arm deliberately into the feather, though, then the random and distracting light touch would become a repetitive sensation you control, and were more easily able to ignore, similar to the feeling of your own clothes brushing against your skin. Stimming by bouncing a leg or performing some other repetitive motion is just what trying to focus looks like for someone who has difficulty filtering out distracting stimuli. It makes it easier to ignore the small random sensations we experience all the time by simply having a body and existing. For you, it sounds like when you're struggling with anxiety or nervousness, you also find it more difficult to filter out distracting stimuli, and so you associate anxiety with stimming. Understand that association is specific to you, though, because that's the only time you personally struggle with sensory processing. The more general and underlying pattern is to do with sensory processing, and doesn't really indicate nervousness or anxiety at all. Crying actually helps ease pain, physically and emotionally. Old buddy of mine used to say, crying is like jacking off for the soul. What a poet. Being lazy from time to time, sleeping in, just doing nothing. There are so many hustle ads and posters everywhere. My GF and some of my friends fill so much their schedule that there is barely any time for rest, or enjoying a book, or a game, or some math. Me, having pretty busy everyday life, I always make sure to have at least 10 or more hours a week to do nothing productive. Enjoy life, nature, friends, alone time, watch stupid videos, play games. It's funny, when I was younger I had a ton of free time, and always felt like it was important to be productive and make use of it. Often a bit of guilt if I sat around for hours. Now my days and weekends are filled with responsibilities and events, and things going on without me even explicitly trying to fill them. And I find that any time I have nothing to do feels amazing. If I happen to get a day where I'm totally by myself and nothing is planned, I will happily play 8 hours of video games and not feel like a moment was wasted. Time you enjoy wasting is not time wasted. Taking a nap during lunch breaks. Some look down on it, but I get a lot of energy from it. I wish I could. I sit down at break and I'm wide awake, no matter if it's in my car or the break room. I get back to my desk after auditing some trailers and sit down. My eyes instantly start to close. Sometimes it's not really about falling asleep. Just closing your eyes, laying back, and purging any thoughts from your mind is enough. All of Asia has done this forever. You ever spend time at an office in China? It's almost eerie how quiet and dark it gets at lunchtime. Dudes roll out cots from under their desk and zonk out for a solid hour. Talking to yourself, although it can be taken as a sign of loneliness, also helps you concentrate and organize ideas, of course, without overdoing it. If you do this in public, put on earphones or something. Also set your phone to silent so you don't look foolish if it rings. PPL call me crazy for it, but this is what gets me clarity, so F them, LOL. Talking to ourselves is one of the best ways to understand the situation, idea, whatever it is, as much as it helps us to understand our own selves. And well, who wouldn't want to have a good relationship with their own selves? Hey man, did you already subscribe on me? You don't? Subscribe and press like faster. In law school, in the US, you have one exam in each course at the end of the year. That's it. No midterm. No tests during the year. A final. That's it. A 3-hour final exam that determines your grade. There's a bit of pressure, to put it mildly. And, at least where I went to law school, everybody who wanted to type their answers to a particular exam, say civil procedure, were put in a big room to do so. Not everybody used a computer back then. Some people chose to handwrite their exams. Yeah, I'm old. I'm a typer, so into the typing room I went for our first exam. We settled in and got to work. 3 grueling hours later, that felt like 30 minutes. We finished, and were talking with each other in the hallway outside of the exam room, when one of my classmates looked at me and said, "You know, you talked to yourself during the whole exam, right?" I had no idea. I was mortified. I tried to not do it during my other exams, but I couldn't stop. So I sat in the back, in the corner. It's apparently a stress reaction. Staying up late. Some people have different circadian rhythms, and it makes evolutionary sense that in order for a population to thrive, you couldn't all be asleep at once. I feel like getting a good night's rest conversely. Some people are very smug about how little of sleep they get when it's horribly unhealthy. It really depends, though. The amount of sleep people need is not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. Some people genuinely do function healthily off of 4-6 hours. Of course, it's also true that many people's lives demand less sleep than they actually need, so I can see people being smug about making do while overworked and underslept. Recent science news reporting indicates that some forms of sleep deprivation releases chemicals that affect the dopamine receptors. The chemicals resemble ketamine. If that's so, a person might have a bit of a high that prevents them from noticing the other detrimental effects. At least it would help them not notice the effects until the known long-term health issues arise. Took me a lifetime to figure this out. Growing up, I always struggled to make it to school without having a disgusting lack of sleep. Often I'd be in bed at 12:30, 1 a.m. and have to be up at 6. That habit made its way into adult life when I graduated college and got myself a 9-5. I remember having the worst anxiety on Sunday because Friday, Saturday I was actually able to sleep from 2 a.m. till 9 a.m. But Sunday I'd have to try and force myself back to sleep early. Then 5 years ago I got a bartending job. At first I worked from 9 p.m. till 2 a.m., but going to bed at 3-4 a.m. wasn't optimal. Eventually I found work where I was leaving work at 9:30, 10 p.m. Perfect. Now I have time before and after work to relax. I go in for 6 hours, make $200, $300 and come home. Work has never been more relaxing, and I'll never sacrifice my sleep for the sake of working normal hours. Not being friendly to everyone you meet makes sense. Some people just aren't good to begin with. I'm friendly to everyone until they give me a reason not to be. Trust me, the bad ones do right away. That's my general philosophy. Give everyone the same amount of respect when you meet, add, and subtract depending on your experience with the person. Some people aren't good, sure. But this is a dangerous mentality. If you start off every interaction with the mindset that the other person most likely sucks, they will tend to match that energy. This will then reinforce your belief that everybody else sucks, when in reality, you are indeed the asshole. Being picky. Learning to say no sometimes is a good habit and shows you know what you really want or need. I am not so sure. Yes, learning to say no is important, particularly setting good boundaries. But I view that as a different thing than being picky. I think the key for me is whether or not you can explain your preference and particularly why the boundary is important to your health and well-being. Being picky can be really detrimental to growth, and I think that is far more common. If you just stick to what you know you like, you aren't being open to new experiences. I borrow and modified this related quote because I have kids and I liked it so much. Not sure of the original source. You learn something about every new experience you have, good or bad. It's really good to learn how the world actually works because it prepares us for the rest of our lives. When you have a choice, I encourage you to choose new real-world experiences if that's an option. As long as you know it's safe and right, it can only give you more information to make future decisions and another experience to connect with people on. The experience is what is important, not our expectations of it. If we don't know what it's like, how can we possibly get it right? Did you know that you can change how you think? Next time your brain is trying to trick you out of a new experience, say, "Quiet brain, it's safe and right. I'll just try it and see." I also think it's really important to connect with people, and being open to new things gives you a huge advantage to doing that. Cracking your knuckles. I do this all the time. It's completely harmless, but it can be really loud, which can annoy people, especially if you do it without thinking. You also end up having to deal with people saying it's bad for your fingers. The only thing it can do, if you're not careful about it, is strain and stretch the ligaments in your fingers. That can cause you pain when you're old, so be careful about it. I have carpal tunnel syndrome, so I do it sometimes to increase blood flow to my fingers to help the numbness go away. I try not to crack my knuckles unless they can actually be cracked, which is every 15 to 20 mins or so. It's apparently caused by escaped gases from the synovial fluid in between the knuckles. When they crack, it breaks those bubbles of gas, usually nitrogen. and they redissolve into the fluid to be recracked a little while later. I find if I don't crack them, my fingers get a little stiff. Working out too hard. Currently sitting around frustrated with a bombed-out shoulder that probably because I wanted slightly better cardio. Most of the time I'm able to do whatever I need to, until I'm not. Thanks for watching this video. Subscribe, press like, and comment. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.